Out of both curiosity and a bit of a proof of concept, I wanted to put ChatGPT to the test in programming. I was aware that it can answer some basic questions in terms of C Sharp and various different languages. I've seen code examples, and I'd heard some stories about programs being designed and things of that nature. But I wanted to really put the context tools to the test. If I kept asking questions, kept adding to the program, would it continue to build this program in its contextual mind and continue to give me relevant answers? Did I need to ask more elementary questions, or could I just paste error codes and see what happens? I decided to put a program together called ClipRipper. And the idea here is that it takes a video file and can take a segment out of that file. It's very basic, just a front end for FFmpeg, but through adding different features, I plan to make it more and more complex. Though it was mostly trial and error, I did find a workflow that seemed to work. Essentially, if I came into a dead end and I ended up having to ask a lot of questions surrounding an issue that I was having, once I eventually completely solved that problem, I would go back in time, I would simply scroll up and edit. And that way I could continue the conversation as if the bug had never sprung up. Now, that's a little bit unfair as far as testing goes, but I was really unsure how much context I could really pack in there. A lot of the initial answers ChatGPT was giving me were incredibly lengthy, like full pages. And so I want to start by saying, and I think it's important and fair to say that I was using GPT-3, potentially 3.5 at the time, whatever the default model was, but this was before the GPT-4 official release. Now, ChatGPT has this really clean interface, and part of the problem with that is you can't really see the nuts and bolts behind the scenes. You can't see when you've run out of tokens or when you're taxing the system. So without that feedback, you kind of have to look for what might look like maybe memory issues or dementia, so to speak. As an example, you can easily ask about something that was described in the paragraph above, but something that was described 5 or 6 paragraphs ago, you might see signs that it's being forgotten, or the system might act like it never happened. And that, at least I felt like I had some experience with. I'd previously put a lot of time into novel AI, getting a handle on how a lot of those AI context tools work and function. So rather than turning this into a simple test or proof of concept video, which is kind of irrelevant now that GPT-4 is out anyway, I'm going to spoil it and say, yes, it worked. Not only that, but it was actually really impressive and very fast. The program did what I already described and what it was intended to do almost instantaneously, but that part's not too surprising. FFmpeg does all the heavy lifting there, and really we just added a button that executed code. So, no big deal. But I wanted to keep building on it. I wanted to make it really easy to use. A file picker, drag and drop functionality, have it scan the file, all kinds of good stuff. One by one, these features kept creeping into the program, and GPT seemed to handle it in stride. There are points in time where you may need to start a whole new conversation. If you want to add entirely different functionality, or you just have a conceptual question about, is this possible? Is this the easy way to accomplish this? That type of conversation is sometimes easier to have on the side. I also found it easy sometimes to just take my entire section of code as it was built and say, here's basically what I have now. How do I add this? And it was really easy for GPT to understand that and to adapt it into whatever. I found actually doing it that way sometimes gave me the most relevant answers too. Some of the suggestions it gave me felt like the really long way to do stuff, and I did it anyway in certain cases, and there were certain times where I tried to argue with it. It seems to handle operating within constraints pretty well. So if you tell it, I only want to use this specific version of something, or I only want to use this specific type of function, it seems to do its best to try to give you an answer. But the biggest issue that I continually came across is that a lot of information was outdated. Mostly with libraries and mostly with third-party stuff, but that's not really ChatGPT's fault. I believe the training material for the version of GPT that I was using probably ended maybe in 2020, so it's hard to expect a lot of that to be completely up to date. Now, I know that tools like Copilot exist, but I always felt like that was more like IntelliSense and you really had to be a programmer. The original idea behind this was, can I go in as more of a layman? That said, I probably couldn't have finished what I started without a programming background and some basic knowledge of what I was doing on the forefront. To get everything perfectly the way I wanted it did take some time, and it did take some back and forth. There was some factually incorrect information that I had to suss out and figure out how to solve. But compared to a manual, or compared to traditional learning, compared to almost any type of resource that you could have at your disposal as a programmer, having a plain text knowledge base that can understand basic English and can regurgitate code as an answer is amazing. And I love that ChatGPT can understand and communicate at different levels at the same time. If any one of you has ever tried to read and understand a GitHub repository and try to understand what a developer is trying to communicate, you probably get my meaning. In some cases, ChatGPT can act as a middleman, like a buffer. It's sort of a filter for understanding and can really help you learn. So productivity goes through the roof. As I say that, I know I sound like a shill, but I promise you, OpenAI probably doesn't even know I exist. I think this is going to be entirely true of large language models of the future. ChatGPT is the first of many, and hopefully even bigger, even better. If you've checked out my other videos, you know I can be excited about the frontier of technology. In the exact same ways I look at Stable Diffusion as a tool for art generation, I look at ChatGPT as a tool for everything generation. For decades, we've had an accessible human compendium of knowledge, digitized and at our fingertips, and it's never been easier to use until now. The choice is ours, and whether or not we want to use it or be afraid of it. There's new innovations that people haven't even thought of yet, and new ways of harnessing this technology that somebody's going to figure out tomorrow. Why can't that be you? Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it inspired you the way that I felt when I made it. And in the comments below, let me know what you were able to do with ChatGPT on your own. You'd be very surprised how much of your interaction inspires these videos. So as always, if you like it, please hit that like button. If you dislike it, please let me know how much you hate me. And as always, thanks for watching.